All right, so this is Unit 2 review. We'll work on some of the proofs here. Um, so let's see. In this one, we know that angle 2 and 3 are the same. And we're trying to prove 1 and 4 are the same. And hopefully you can see right off the bat, 1 and 2 have to be the same. And 3 and 4 have to be the same because those are vertical angle pairs. So I'm not going to actually list the given first, and maybe you'll see why here. I'm going to start with 1's congruent to 2. So I'm starting with this angle and linking it to the 2, right? So that's because vertical angles are congruent. Which, by the way, in our reasons list is number, I think, 11 or 10. Okay, now I'm going to say 2 is congruent to 3. Okay. Angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. And that's a given. And 3 is congruent to 4 because they're vertical angles. Vertical angles are congruent. So I've linked 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. So that means that 1 is the same thing as 4. Now, you may have learned the idea that, like, if A equals B and B equals C, then you can say A equals C. That's actually called the transitive property. If you don't realize that that's the transitive property, I'll also take substitution, because in my mind it's really no different than you saying, let me plug in this C right there. Right? So you could think of it as, take this line, and you know that 2 and 1 are the same, so you can replace the 2 with the 1. And take this line and replace 3 with the 4, and you get that line. So in my mind, that's also substitution. So on the test, I take substitution or transitive. And if you actually look at the reasons page that I gave you guys, I kind of lumped them together right here in number 20, so you don't really have to choose between them. Okay, let's take a look at the next proof. This one's a long one. Ooh, 10 steps. All right. So let's do the easy stuff first. Given IA is perpendicular to AN. IA is perpendicular to AN. That's over here. And that's in step 5. That's this given. Right, so we got that one. PIA is a right angle, so the angle's 90. PIA, that's this one is a right angle, so the angle's 90. That's also given. 2 is congruent to 3, or M2 equals M3. Here's the other given down here. It's all right. Angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, or M angle 2 equals M angle 3. Okay, so we got all the givens. The proof is that 1's congruent to 4, or M1 equals M4. So that's got to go down here. But we don't know the reason yet. Okay, so let's work our way through this. Step 2 says IA is perpendicular to PI. Right now, we know that we had a 90-degree angle. So, of course, those two lines should be perpendicular, but the reason for it has to start with, you have an angle that's 90, so you get perpendicular lines. All the perpendicular ones are on page 3 here. If you look right here, well, you start with a 90-degree angle, so you get perpendicular lines. That's the definition of perpendicular lines. So let's come back over here. Definition of perpendicular lines. Okay, so we're dealing with this part of the picture here. This line is perpendicular to this one. There. So then the next line says, so angles 3 and 4 are complementary. So that should make sense too. The total's 90. So of course 3 and 4 should be complementary. So let's see what starts with perpendicular lines lead to complementary angles. So this is perpendicular leads to one 90-degree angle. This is perpendicular leads to congruent angles. And this is perpendicular leads to complementary angles, which is what we have. It's this long exterior sides one. So that one was if the exterior sides of two adjacent angles are perpendicular, then the angles are complementary. Okay. Number 4 says definition of complementary angles. The definition is way up here somewhere. The definition says if you have complementary angles, then you can add them up to 90, or vice versa. If you have two angles that add to 90, then they're complementary. And if we come back to ours over here, we're already told that we have complementary angles. So the definition would say, so if I add them, if I add their measurements, I get 90. Okay. So let's see. These pieces here kind of go together to form one chunk of the proof. Hopefully you can kind of see how each step leads to the next one in the first 4. Notice in step 5, I've got a new given here. And you might notice that 5 to 6 feels an awful lot like 2 to 3. But 5 to 6 IA perpendicular to AN is over on this side of the diagram now. So now they're saying, well, 1 and 2 are complementary. Well, that's the same exact setup as before, so the reason's going to be just like number 3. The exterior sides of two adjacent angles. If they're perpendicular, then the angles are complementary. Okay. Now the next step's blank, but notice up here we went from complementary angles to saying let's add them up and make 90. So we'll do the same thing right here. Let's add them up and set them equal to 90. So that was definition of complementary angles. All right. So hopefully you can kind of see that these 3 steps also go together as a chunk. Now the next line says substitution. And if you notice in the 2 chunks of the proof, here's something that equals 90, and here's something that equals 90. And hopefully you kind of recognize by this point that if 2 things equal the same amount, we've been using substitution to plug one in for the other, right? Instead of 90 down here, I can write n3 plus m4. So I'm going to write here measurement of 1 plus measurement of 2. But then instead of 90, I'm going to write measurement of 3 plus measurement of 4. Okay, that's substitution. Now in the next line, notice I've used all these M angles. So I'm going to stick with the M angle version down here. I'll get rid of that congruent version. In fact, I'm going to move this over just a little bit to there. Excuse me. Okay, so the goal is to get M1 equals M4. And so we need to get rid of the 2 and the 3. But I've noticed the 2 on the left side is equal to the 3 on the right side. So at this point, I'm going to erase this line and just rewrite the M version. If I subtract straight down, the 2's will cancel, the 3's will cancel, and I'm left with M angle 1 equals the measurement of angle 4. And that's because I subtracted. I did line 8 minus line 9, gave me line 10. Okay, hope that helps a little.